Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of Knicks Film School, presented by BetUS. And I am here for the first time in, recording this on Sunday, August 4th, in just about 4 weeks, I think, because the last time an episode with this fine gentleman, posted, I just looked up before, it was July 8th. And as I say hello to Jeremy Cohen, I'm going to ask you, Jeremy, you must prove your worth as a Knicks fan by getting this question correct. I'm looking at it. I would not have known this, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I'm going to make you look bad. What transaction did the Knicks complete on July 8th, 2024, which is the last time we spoke? And hello.
Hello, July 8th, 2024. It's my goodness.
If you get this, I'm looking at the transaction log on Basketball Reference. That's the only reason I know it. I don't know if I would have ever been more impressed by you than if you get this right.
I'm trying to think of where I was or what I was doing on July 8th. Was this a move? Go ahead.
It was a transaction. They did a thing.
They did a thing. Well, we know that it wasn't the Mikal Bridges trade because that already happened.
That became official on July 6th.
Correct.
I'm confused. What is the thing that we're trying to remember? What happened?
I'm quizzing Jeremy on the transaction that the Knicks completed on July 8th, the last time we recorded a pod or posted a pod.
All right, I think I got it. Was it Huck Porty signed to the two-way?
Oh, was that it?
You're good, You're good.
I know my timelines.
What were you going to get?
What day was the Brunson extension?
The 11th, 12th?
Actually, funny enough, if we're going by Basketball Reference, which does a pretty good job of updating their transaction law, they have the Precious signing. The Brunson one isn't in there yet. So did the Brunson one officially happen yet?
Jeremy, you'd know this better probably, but there's a picture on the interwebs of Jalen Brunson signing a thing, right?
Should be. The easiest way to probably look it up is Knicks PR. If they talked about it, then it happened.
And it was done.
And on July 12th, Knicks PR said the New York Knicks signed Jalen Brunson a contract extension.
Oh, well, then Basketball Reference needs to get their stuff together.
No, but not me. I got my stuff together.
You got your stuff together. Congratulations. You got the Huck Porty two-way contract. The point that I was trying to make, probably poorly, is that a lot of stuff has happened since we last spoke. The aforementioned Jalen Brunson extension, a couple other little moves that we're going to talk about, all of those things. And a new date has emerged, but there is no action that has, as of right this moment, been associated with that date. And that date was yesterday, as we're recording this, 2 days ago for people listening to this, which is when Julius Randle became eligible to sign a contract extension. We're going to save the Randle discussion for later. First, we're going to play a little catch up and go through some of the stuff that has taken place, again, since we last spoke. And I realized that I misspoke. The last time we had a regular pod posted was the day of the Huck Porty signing. We did go on live for the Brunson extension, so we don't have to talk about that again. So that's good.
For a second, I thought you were going to say we went live for the Huck Porty sign. I was like, my memory is shot. If we did that, I have no recollection of it. Like the idea of a live stream for a two-way contract, that would be, man.
If you were blacked out in Vegas, I don't even know if you were no, I don't think you were in Vegas on July 8th. Were you?
I was not. I was almost in. No, I was in New York. I think I was in New York, and then I went to LA, and then I was in Vegas.
But that's a new life goal, which I'm setting for you and not for myself because I'm married with children and I don't get blackout drunk anymore. You are not married and you have no children. So my new life goal is to find you at some point when you are completely inebriated and get you to record a pod such that I will remind you of said pod, several months down the line and you will have no recollection of it. That seems like a good idea.
Yeah, there was a moment, what was it, in 2022, the summer, when we found out about Donovan Mitchell, where I was out and about. I was not sober. And there was the Shams news of Mitchell wanting out and the Knicks being interested, it's like, oh no, this is terrible timing if we have to record. Unfortunately, it was late enough.
No, we
didn't because it was too late. And I was like, thank God. Because if we had, I would have pulled it together, but it wouldn't have been pretty. Like, it wouldn't have been fun for me. And I'm glad we didn't have to. So,
yeah, I too am happy we didn't have to do that. I'm also happy we don't have to deal with any Donovan Mitchell rumors anymore. That was annoying. I didn't really care for those. Okay, let's knock a few of these out. I don't think we really need to spend a whole lot of time on the other non-Randle stuff, but we try to cover everything here together, so we'll do that. Going in date order, Cameron Payne. So Cameron Payne last season spent actually only half of the season with Philadelphia, the other half of the season with Milwaukee. He signed a 1-year deal for the veterans minimum. I think the most interesting part of the campaign signing for me was the subsequent reporting that went on afterwards. And Ian Begley, who obviously we love here and we have so much respect for because of things like this. Initially, Begley seemed to insinuate that Payne was coming here to be a part of the rotation because, in short, why would he have come here to not play when there are other places that could have offered him, similar money where he maybe would have had a better shot to play? And then Ian kind of stepped back on that a few days later and said, hold up, that was not right. And Deuce McBride still figures to be a part of the rotation. Even Tyler Kolek, it seems like, is ahead of Payne in the rotation. So I'm going to shoot it to you first. What is your takeaway from all that and the Payne signing?
Good depth piece for a team that needed depth last year, and certainly in the playoffs when guys were getting hurt. Always good to be able to fill that. I think, from a culture standpoint, we know how close Cameron Payne and Mikal Bridges are. Makes you wonder, of course, is there room for Ryan Arcidiacono at the beginning of the season, or is he going to be someone who maybe the Knicks have a couple roster spots open somewhere at the deadline? Like, that's where they call him up, that sort of thing. Don't really know. Doesn't necessarily matter, because if you need Payne to play, he can. To me, it was more morale. The thing that was being said, of course, was Kolek being the backup point guard, which relegates Payne to third string. But there was also the thought in my mind of, well, even if Kolek's the backup point guard, that doesn't mean he's in the rotation. Like,
yes,
based on
and that was clarified later by Ian.
And to some, it might be, well, how does that make any sense? Well, again, it goes back to the point of when you look at Deuce cracking the rotation as a rookie, or Grimes, like, it's Tibbs. He has a style that he likes to play. He trusts his veterans. It's easy to see why Payne would get more trust from the onset over Kolek, because Payne's a veteran, Kolek isn't. But with that said, I think it's an important role that Payne has, which is all it takes is one, and hopefully this doesn't happen a lot, but one Brunson DNP for everyone to say, oh my God, how are the Knicks going to manage this?
Yeah.
And Kolek could be the backup point guard. It also doesn't mean that I expect Kolek to start games. Now, maybe he could, but there's also, we saw it with the center position. When Mitchell Robinson went down and Hartenstein was there were times where Sims started ahead of Hartenstein because of the bench unit. And that wasn't actually the right call in the end, but it's the same thought process of, okay, well, maybe someone like Payne would leapfrog Kolek if the situation presented itself as an opener, and perhaps it changes based on game to game or how Kolek advances, whatever it would be. But it's never a bad thing to have depth at the point guard position. And it's something the Knicks have done frequently. They have very often not gone into, or I should rephrase, they really like having at least 3 players who can be primary ball handlers. It just comes down to how much
point a lot.
I have. And it's true, because that's just, and as they should, that's a key position. We know, especially assuming Julius Randle still here, you want him to take heavy usage, but you don't want him to necessarily run the offense quite in the way that we saw in 2021-22, or even the year before that. So finding players who, like the most important thing to me with Payne, pull-up guy, hits players in the corners, 3-point shooter, like those, that's all important. It's the other stuff where he's not going to be efficient. The on-off is pretty bad. He doesn't finish well. But you can look past that if this is the guy who's basically 11th in the rotation, and it's a 9-man rotation. So you live with it.
Yeah, I think so. A couple things to your point about all it takes is one Brunson DNP. So Brunson last year played in 77 games, and I'm fairly certain. I remember checking the math on this. I'm not going to go back and check it right now, but I believe the Knicks scored exactly 100 points per game in the games that Jalen Brunson did not play. The worst offense in the league last year was the Memphis Grizzlies. They scored 105.8 points per game. So if you want to look at it, like the Knicks were 6 points worse than the worst offense in the league when Brunson didn't play. And Deuce was available for those games. Julius Randle was available for at least one, I think maybe a couple of those games. And it's like, to your point about the Knicks like to have at least 3 primary ball handlers. If there's a position to stock up on, it's probably the one where it's like your number one is your superstar leader who you depend on for everything. And your number 2, as of right now, if you're keeping it positional, which is what gets into the diciness with Deuce McBride, your number 2 right now technically is Tyler Kolek, who's a rookie. And we don't know. You never know how rookies are going to respond in the pros. So like you said, he's an NBA player. He's good at some things. Do I think at some point he'll play a role on this team? Probably, but that's because it's a long season and guys get injured. It's not a big deal. Okay. Moving up in order of importance, I think, because we're now going to get to a player that is as of now apparently going to play. Precious Achiuwa re-signed for 1 year, $6 million. Waived his the de facto no trade clause that comes when you sign a new contract with a team that has your bird rights. So they will be able to trade him as of January 15th, not December 15th, January 15th, because of some CBA nuances. My 2 thoughts. Happy Precious is back. He's a good player. I'm comfortable going into the season with him as the backup center. At the same time, it makes sense that he waited around for $6 million because you figure what was available to him on the open market, probably something around the minimum. And this is where I've been waiting. I owe you an apology because I sat here.
I've been waiting too.
A few times. And I was like, nah, Precious. I think his range is somewhere 6 to 8 million. Someone out there will pay him that. He's a young player. He's got some upside. Nope. 1 year, $6 million. And the very, very, very strong inference there is that no one else was willing to give him. I mean, what do you I don't know. Could you have gotten a multi-year deal on like $4 million a year? I don't even know. My guess is most of the offers out there for him were at the minimum. Maybe from other contending teams. I think that was reported, but no, he was. It's a good deal for him, and it's a good deal for the Knicks.
So, in terms of the de facto no trade clause, if it's 1 year that's guaranteed. Like D'Angelo Russell, for example, he last offseason got a 2-year deal with a player option for the second year. But that first year, I mean, that's the only one that was really guaranteed. And he was the first player under the new CBA to waive the de facto no trade clause because it used to be that anytime you did that, it automatically guaranteed that. And now it allows players to waive it. John, I'm going to ask you this. What was the most interesting thing about the Precious Achiuwa situation to you?
About the situation is the fact that it lasted so long.
Sure.
Yeah.
But is there anything about it at all that stood out to you the most? And maybe it was that. And if it's that, that's fine.
For me, it was the fact that it took a while. And as we discussed, my read on the fact that it took a while is they thought that they maybe would be able to use him or need to use him in a sign and trade situation. that was the most interesting part to me, I guess. I mean, maybe I don't know what you're angling for. I mean, there is a part of me that is interested in the fact that, like, do I think that there was probably a sign and trade deal out there involving Precious where they could have added a second or maybe a couple of seconds and got a center that more traditionally fit the sorts of centers they go after? I think probably. I'd be surprised if they couldn't, like, do Precious in some seconds for Nick Richards. I don't know that, obviously, but that's what. And the fact that they chose to bring Precious back either means that deal wasn't out there, or that they're comfortable with him and they like him to a certain extent. That's really it for me.
Yeah, all incredibly valid. The thing that stood out the most to me at the time was they gave him a 1-year contract with no options.
With
not
no
even a
team
player option, right? Like no team option.
Or a player option, yeah.
Right. And I wouldn't expect a player option of someone of his caliber, but the team option is the thing that stood out the most to me.
Jeremy.
He's not. No, that's very few are.
There's only one Ron Baker.
Yeah, at least only one former NBA player, Ron Baker.
Yes, that's true.
But the fact that he got 1 year, it tells me, like, if we're going to already shop this player, who, to your point, I'm sure they were looking at sign and trade deals. And if you're thinking, well, there probably wasn't a trade that materialized, but also any move with Precious Achiuwa is likely going to be impacted by base year compensation. So, John, you mentioned the January 15th because of the CBA ramifications as opposed to December 15th. The reason it's January 15th is because Precious Achiuwa and his new deal meet all the criteria for base year compensation. For those who need a brush up, what that means, you have to qualify for all 4 categories. Number 1, player is a bird or early bird free agent. Precious Achiuwa was a bird rights free agent. Number 2, his new salary is worth more than the minimum. We all know that $6 million is more than the whatever $1 million that the minimum would be there. He receives a raise greater than 20%, which he did. And his team is at or above the cap immediately after the signing. And the Knicks, of course, were above the salary cap when they did this. So what the Knicks basically said was, if Precious Achiuwa is going to be a base year compensation candidate and it involves weird math going out, it means more to us to sign him for this amount and then likely move him from January 15th until the trade deadline, because you don't have to worry about base year compensation anymore. It's just the restriction for moving him. And I think that is going to be an important plot point moving forward, because the Knicks have essentially given him very little runway in terms of coming back. If they wanted him back, the way I see it, they would have given him a team option. And Precious Achiuwa could have said no.
You mean, when you say back, you mean like
the following year
in their long-term plans, or as long as a term plans as you're going to have for a guy of this caliber? Okay.
Right. If you're Precious Achiuwa and you're signing up for a 1-year, $6 million deal, if the Knicks said, hey, we'll give you a second year and it'll be, could be a flat $6 million. It could be 8% off of the $6 million. If you're Achiuwa, you probably take that deal, because why wouldn't you want that? And maybe he didn't, but based on how he played. Why wouldn't you want
the team option?
Correct. Now you could say he's betting on himself.
I was going to say that would be my comeback, is he's betting on himself here.
Also, I think there's a reason why he's still in this position. Like, you could say, all right, Precious, you are going to be the backup starter, or is it the backup center? Excuse me.
Yeah.
That's your role. You have the opportunity. But it's also, if you play well, you're still getting $6 or so million. If you play poorly, you're back on the market. I get the betting on himself factor. And at the end, it's fine. But what it really means at the end of the day is that unless the Knicks want to go through the same thing that they just did with Precious Achiuwa about, do we sign and trade him? Do we add him to other salary? Yeah. Whatever. The runway is a lot shorter in terms of moving him. And they could. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to, can I give you a completely disingenuous comeback?
Please do.
The last backup center the Knicks had just signed for 3 years and $90 million with Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, but I'd argue that with Hartenstein being a better player than Mitchell Robinson, like he was the starter. He was no longer a backup. The stats showed that he probably shouldn't have been a backup in the first place.
But if I'm Precious and I'm now sitting behind Mitchell Robinson, who we don't have to document Mitch's injury history here, like he's going to play however many games he plays. As of right now, I'm the only game in town. So I'm going to get a chance to show that I could be at some point he's probably, unless I make a trade, soon, he's going to get a chance to show that he could be a starting caliber center in the league, which if he does a decent job at that, there could be a nice payday waiting for him next summer. And it's disingenuous for the reasons you pointed out. Isaiah Hartenstein. Yeah.
At the end of the day, he signed a 1-year contract. He was comfortable with it. The Knicks were comfortable with it. But if you're the Knicks and you're a team that prioritizes team control, like, yeah, you could do the whole thing again next year.
You don't think they asked for it? I would guess they asked for it.
Well, I'm sure there's no risk if you're the Knicks to get a team option on the books.
Exactly.
Because
you see what I'm getting at here, right?
I see what you're getting at, but at the same time, like, I don't think that they want to do this again. I don't think they want to be like waiting on Precious another summer, seeing if they can cooperate with him. Like, it doesn't strike me as their style. And if you were the right, the other factor,
agree with you.
Just one more thing. The other factor here is I would imagine that the $6 million, in addition to potentially helping facilitate any trades that they need. Of course, if you want to look at Nick Richards, it's more than Nick Richards, so it doesn't hard cap you the first apron. If you want to look at other aggregation deals, like that could probably help you too. But $6 million is a tick more than the taxman level exception. So it's being able to say, you're earning just north of that. I get entirely what you're saying. I also recognize the fact that, to your point, based on what you said, and it's true, there is a disingenuous factor to it. But I don't think it's without any logic whatsoever.
Let's agree on the fact that the Knicks were probably let me rephrase that. It would be logical to assume the Knicks were more comfortable going with the straight 1-year deal as opposed to the 1+1 for the reasons that you're saying, which is that they foresee some percentage of high above zero chance that they're going to use Achiuwa in a trade at some point this season. So, but not until January 15th. So he's going to be here for a while. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good on the Precious conversation. So is there anything else before we get to the Julius part of it?
I don't believe so when it comes to Precious. I mean, yeah, he has an opportunity, especially with Mitchell Robinson's history, where he can fill in. I don't expect him to be a Knick a year from now. And he literally will not be, because he won't be under contract, but I just don't I don't think that he's the guy who gets brought back another time. He's salary to them, and he fits a need at the moment.
If we're going to put a bow on this and tie, see what I did there, and tie the Precious signing and the campaign signing together, I think we can do it in this way. I think the Knicks post Mikal Bridges summer is evidence of the fact that they know there's going to be some stuff left to do. This is not the team that they anticipate going into April, whenever the playoffs start. And they're giving themselves some different options here to do some different things along the way. If there is a trade that eventually needs to send out to Supride for whatever, whomever, well, now at least you have a campaign sitting there ready to step in. And like we talked about the Precious thing. So, yeah, this roster was not done yet. And here's one other thing we should mention before we get to Julius. They still have the $5.168 million taxpayer mid-level to use. They are more than $7 million under the second apron, which is what they can't go past. So, not a lot of great players out there on the market. You could argue that the most enticing name for that or one of the most, was Gordon Hayward, and he just retired. Like it's slim pickings. I saw a tweet from one of the aggregation accounts of the Marcus Morris sweepstakes that is developing between the Sixers and the Cavs. I think we need to be a little bit more careful about our word usage here in culture. But like, let's end with that before we get to Julius. Do you think that they will use that before the season?
I'll answer that by saying I think they should.
I also think they should.
And it has nothing to do with, to your point, the level of talent out there, not an insane amount. I mean, we're basically saying that the Knicks are overpaying a player who won't be in the rotation just so that they can trade him. And that's what I've been hoping for the last month or so. But it's one of those things where I wonder, in reality, does it work? And I know a lot of folks are going to say, well, hey, if you're the Knicks, why don't you just save it for the buyout market? And they could, right? But okay, so who's available in the buyout market who earns less than the non-taxpayer mid-level exception and will actually fundamentally change the trajectory of your team? Like, is there really going to be someone who's earning less than that $12 or so million contract? Let me hear him.
And for anybody who doesn't know, the reason it has to be less than that is because if you're a first apron team, you can't sign a buyout guy who was making more than the mid-level, which is $12.8 million. Should I make you guess again? I'll give you a hint, and I'll give you like 5 seconds to guess. They both play for the same team, and they could both. One is definitely a big man, and the other one could be said as a big man.
This is a bad team, I take it?
It's a team that should be mediocre this year. Maybe on the low end of mediocre.
So they've got players who are earning less than $12.8 million.
Two.
That'll be a mediocre team. I'll
give you another hint. They're not in the East.
Okay, they're not in the East. That means it's a team in the West. It's not the Jazz.
No.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's going to be Portland.
A little bit better than the Jazz. This team could be a playoff team this year. Maybe not playoff. Probably play in.
Team. It's the Warriors. They don't.
No,
but they wouldn't.
It is the Houston Rockets who have Steven Adams, who's making under 12.8, good NBA center, and Jeff Green, who's making 8, and they're both expiring. That's it. Those are the only two names that I could find.
So to be clear, it's a backup center who missed the entire season due to a knee injury.
Yes,
who's on the wrong side of 30.
He's the best guy that I could find. Yes,
and then it's Jeff Green, who's 37,
who's 87 years
right. Great. All right. That's why we should not be using it. Perfect. No, I'm
just making your point for you that there's nobody worth saving it for.
Like, we could go back to Isaac Okoro, but there's no room for him to play. So, like, unless there's a way, like, okay, so you also can't sign and trade for him, right? I would imagine the Cavs probably want to sign and trade for him.
No.
If the Knicks sign and trade for him, that would hard cap them at the first apron. So they can't do that. They could, I mean, in theory, right? In theory, they could sign a player and say, you're on the periphery of the rotation. We can't promise you anything. However, you'd get paid, and we would do everything in our power to move you. So you would get an opportunity, before the deadline. It's not a very compelling case. And I'm using this player as an example because I'm looking at a list of best available players. Just like, all right, Markelle Fultz is not going to be a Knick.
He's
not going to
probably the best name available.
But it's an example of, if you were to say to someone like Fultz, but not Fultz, hey, you'll make money, because it seems like outside of maybe roster camp, there's just not a whole lot of spots for you. Would you rather be paid the taxpayer mid-level exception to not play, or would you rather be paid the minimum to not play? That is essentially the best argument you can make if you're the Knicks. Like, I don't think Jay Crowder should be making the taxpayer mid-level exception. I also don't know how many teams are clamoring for Jay Crowder. So it's that school of thought where the reason why I've also been so determined for the Knicks to use this, it's because it's so hard to add salary And in a league that penalizes you if you take on any more salary, having more is better than having less. But you also need to do something with it. Just having them on your team, it's probably not going to be the best circumstance, but I'd be more than fine with them doing it, because even if you laid out the numbers, right? You signed someone there. You've got a little over $7 million left. You sign this player. You still have around $2 million to use to sign any minimum guys. And you're thinking, okay, well, you wouldn't need to sign any minimum players. They're at 15 if they sign someone to the taxpayer mid-level. If they made any 2-for-1 trades or 3-for-1 trades or anything that gets more talent out the door, they need to fill roster spots. So they do need some money in between the second apron hard cap and what they would have as a payroll between the amount now plus the taxpayer mid-level, that $2 or so million to bridge the gap. But as time goes on, the minimum contract that they would have to use to fill up their roster to at least 14, it gets smaller and smaller because it's prorated based on the day. So the way that I see it is the Knicks do have the financial capabilities to add someone with the full taxpayer mid-level, let time pass, make some sort of 2-for-1 trade if they had to, which is probably what they would do. And then if they needed to fill a roster spot, which they wouldn't need to because they're at 14. So let's say it's a 3-for-1 trade. They're at 13. They signed someone using the minimum, but it's not the full minimum. It's a prorated. So they can squeeze by and time can be their friend.
Which
That's
they did
why
last
I'm all
year.
in favor of it. Right.
And
exactly.
You called it before anybody else. So congratulations again to you.
Thanks.
I will just say briefly, if you're looking for the ties that bind, Robert Covington is a CAA client. Patty Mills is a CAA client. We should also mention the name Chuma Okeke. The Knicks signed Chuma Okeke to an Exhibit 10 deal, which is a non-guaranteed deal. At this point, not expecting. Yeah, it's a G League. So that's why we're not spending a lot of time. Look, he's a nice flyer.
It's to put extra money into the pocket of someone that you want to be on your G League team.
And then the only other name I wanted to mention is Landry Shamet, only because he's represented by Jason Glushon, who also reps Dante, Jericho Sims, and one other player on their roster who I'm not, it was escaping me at the moment, but they do a lot of business with him. So if maybe that's why you've heard Shamet's name reported. I think Scotto had that, and but whatever. Okay. Quick break to tell you about our new friends from BetUS. Are you looking for a new book this basketball season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, 200% crypto deposit bonus, fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Check out my BetUS link in the description below. 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, best betting variety in the business. Get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And did you know that BetUS can give you your very own personal account manager? Hey, Andrew.
Hey, John.
What do you think about going through an NBA award and making a pick, me and you?
Let's do it. How about MVP?
I like MVP, especially because Jalen Brunson is definitely going to win it, if only. So looking at the odds that I am seeing in front of us, I got to tell you, I feel a little bit like I'm betraying Knicks fans everywhere, but I kind of like Anthony Edwards at plus 1,200 because I think the Timberwolves could do very well in the West, and I think he has another little bit of a leap left in him.
It's cheating to say that Giannis at plus 700 is a great bet. It's a former 2-time MVP that is giving you 7-1 odds. So I like that bet. We slander his name, but Joel Embiid at 7-1 is good money. I do like your call at plus 1,200 for Anthony Edwards. Our beloved Jalen Brunson has the same as Jason Tatum at plus 2,000. I think that's, if this was a first team All NBA odds, I'd like both. I unfortunately have to pass on both. The one I'm interested in, John, as far as a money value, we've talked about this a lot on our Patreon pod lately, but Victor Wembanyama is plus 2,000. And I do think one day he's going to win not one, not two, not three, but multiple MVPs in this league. And if you're thinking the clock starts sooner rather than later, maybe a breakout Wemby second season gives you. I mean, look, parlay this with. We'll go over most improved player odds in the future, but plus 2,000 is just a good value play. And who knows? Maybe the Spurs are like the 3 seed with 40 games left, and suddenly his odds are much better, and you can recalculate. But yeah, Wemby at plus 2,000. Then I do like your Anthony Edwards plus 1,200 bet.
And of course, no bet on any Knick is a bad bet, if only for morale. So Jalen Brunson staring right there for you. Thank you, Andrew, for your thoughts on that. One more time, use the link in the description and get 125% deposit bonus up to $2,000 for your first 3 deposits. You want to do the Randle talk?
Let's do it.
Okay. There are about 18 different ways that we could get into this. I'm gonna let me try this. So, it can never be an easy Julius Randle discussion, because whatever is going to come out of my mouth in the next 5 minutes, or is going to come out of your mouth in the next 5 minutes, it's going to piss a lot of people off, because you cannot have a conversation about Julius Randle without pissing off a somewhat significant portion of the Knicks fan base. That's just where this player is at this point. And people have kind of gotten into their camps because they, I think, view those who maybe don't agree with their general side as just like, how could you think that this player totally sucks, even though I think there's a lot fewer people out there who actually think that Julius Randle totally sucks than the people who love him think. And then for the people on the other side who maybe have some issues with Julius Randle, think that like, well, wait, how could you be all in on this player? Have you not watched the playoffs? Have you not watched this? So all of this is to say, I think the Knicks are in a situation where, given the available reporting from Ian Begley, which is that, again, just to use his words, neither the Knicks or Julius Randle has an extension at the forefront. That's his words, at the forefront. I also thought it was interesting that he included in that same bit of reporting several weeks ago that Julius loves it in New York and very much wants to win in New York and like believes in this team and like all of the things. So my guess is there's maybe a little bit more hesitation on the side of the Knicks than the side of Randle, at least at a number that they would be comfortable signing him at, which is really what this conversation boils down to. If you're the Knicks, you need Julius Randle. You need Julius Randle, and there is probably, almost certainly, no opportunity, a good one at least, to flip Julius Randle into something that you like more than Julius Randle that exists right now. That is true. At the same time, you also have reservations. I'm guessing. Or at least some people in the front office have reservations. I don't have to guess at that, because that's another thing Ian Begley reported about, hey, if this is our team and it's Julius Randle and all the rest of these guys, maybe that's not good enough. Maybe we top out at level B when we need to get to level A. And if we sign Randle to a contract extension right now, there is a possibility, I don't know what the number is, it's a non-zero number, that he does not have the best of years, or at least displays some qualities that would make him less than easily movable with an extension attached to him that will not even start until at least next season. This is the proverbial rock in the hard place, I think. Not that it's a bad situation to be in. It's not. I'm not saying it's a bad situation, but like, whatever side you're on here, I think if you put yourself in the position of Leon Rose, you could at least appreciate where the Knicks are coming from in being hesitant to do anything with Randle right now, while at the same time understanding that like the guy's got one more year before he could become an unrestricted free agent. So your best time to do something, even if it's something you don't really want to do, may be now. That's the best way that I could kind of summarize where I think things are at.
I'm trying to think of where to begin with this. Everything you're saying is correct, and I agree with, right? In terms of the hunch. So let me start off here, right? Julius Randle is a phenomenal player. I mean, he just is. I think that if you love Julius Randle, it's because you recognize that this is someone who is probably destined before his injury to be a 3-time All-NBA player. But also, I mean, yeah, he probably was based on how voting was done and all of that.
I'm gonna go pull up the forward spots, but
we don't have to. But you don't have to look at the forwards. It's the best 15 players in the game. It's based on how they changed the rules.
That's right. It's no more.
Right. I mean, this is someone who. So I mean, you could say, well, maybe that's more of a case against him, but just how he played, especially. I struggle with that personally, but we're getting off topic. Even if you didn't feel like he was in, it's okay. It's okay. I know it's human nature for us to do it, but he was playing at an incredible level. But you could also say, why was his campaign cut short? It was due to the injuries. Where has he not succeeded in the playoffs? He has, the arguments for and against Julius, I think, are both incredibly valid. I happen to fall on the side that is, Julius is a great player, and I just don't think he gets enough credit. But I also don't think that he is here when the Knicks eventually hit their stride. It's why, based on how they gave up everything they did for Mikal Bridges, if you're the Knicks, you feel comfortable doing that because you've got one move left in you, but it's not this year. So the reason I have wanted Julius to extend is because I just feel like, based on what his max is, and especially a little bit below there, that's good value for a really talented player. And we've examined what the market looks like, and just purely what teams have cap space doesn't look great for him. So you could squeeze him if you wanted to. Here's the mistake. And this is a mistake that I have made. I have been viewing this as too binary, as shit or get off the pot. And I thought to myself last week, okay, Julius, let's say he doesn't sign the extension. What does that mean? How does that impact the Knicks? And it's very easy to look at Julius and work forward, but we know the Knicks don't operate that way. These NBA teams, they work backwards. They think of what the target is and how they work backwards. We can quibble about what backwards looks like to the Knicks, but here's what I know. The Knicks, let's say Julius signs the extension. He signs it. He probably does it after, next week. Then that way it springboards him past the 6-month time where he can't be traded, which, if it falls past the trade deadline, means he's got essentially a no trade clause. And that's fine, because the Knicks don't often do anything that really changes up their team super drastically. Okay. He doesn't sign it. They run the risk of losing him for nothing. Trading him. Well, who would they trade him for? Of course, one name that's been swirling about is Karl Anthony Towns. I tweeted about how now, if the Knicks, with the Precious Achiuwa signing, wanted to get Karl Anthony Towns, they would have to wait until mid-season, around the deadline. I mean, really after January 15th, because of the fact that the Achiuwa signing meant that they were not going to really be able to move any of these guys realistically. Like, they're not moving Josh Hart. They're not moving Dante DiVincenzo. The math to get you to Cat, that also doesn't hard cap you at the first apron because you're taking on more money, it features one of those two guys. And that's not happening. It also goes to the greater picture here, which, when it comes to Cat, is Karl Anthony Towns and Julius Randle are very different players. And if you're the Knicks, what you have prided yourself on every single season is, I know last season we could point to the OG trade with RJ and IQ and all of that, but the Knicks love their corner threes. They were 4th in frequency last year. They were 4th the year before. They went out and they got Mikal Bridges, big corner 3 guy. But the best thing about Julius Randle, and DJ Zulo has been so great about talking about this, is he finds guys in the corners. Like, he was number 4 in the NBA last season of players who had 1,500 minutes or more, finding corner threes and getting those corner 3 assists. Mikal Bridges, Julius Randle was. Mikal Bridges, does a decent job at it. Maybe he could do more, but that's not his bread and butter. The year before, I think Randle's like 28th, something like that, but up there. That's not Cat's game. And what you're saying is, if you think that the Knicks, if you look at the math and saying, well, if the Knicks do this with Randle and add Mitch because they'd have to, and then add Precious, and of course that gets you Cat, that it works. That's great. The Knicks deciding to become a 5-out team, or at the very least shifting Cat into a role where he'd be a hub on offense, but unlikely to keep playing within how the Knicks operate as a team. I just don't buy it. I don't see that mid-season they're going to completely change their dynamic. And you could look at OG and say, well, they did that. But it's a very different circumstance, especially because RJ Barrett was actively hurting them based on how his fit with Randle was. And IQ is also up for a contract of his own. Even if you don't feel it's the most compelling case. It also depends on Minnesota making a change that they themselves may have zero interest in. Randle doesn't really fit what they do. Moving Cat is something they might explore in the offseason. It doesn't really work to me. It's not the cleanest fit. It's not seamless. And you're now telling the Knicks, hey, you guys have to completely change aspects of how you play to fit this. I just don't see it. So then there's the third option, right? Which is not shitting and it's not getting off the pot. It's playing out the season. And
what's the third option in the analogy?
It's diarrheaing your pants. I don't know. Like it's something.
Okay, sorry. Play out the season.
You know what it is? It's you don't get off the pot. It's you really have to shit, but you're not home and you're just like clinging for dear life that you hope that that's what this pod's turned into. Here's the crux of it, right? So what's the third thing? It's a sign and trade. If they're not signing him, extending all these things. Sign and trades are complex. They're really frustrating to figure out. So I spent this week and I thought, let's just dig deeper. And the thing that people should probably consider is that when a player gets signed and traded, what's their salary? What does their outgoing salary look like? The salary for someone like Julius, if Julius were signed and traded, the salary for the last season of his preceding contract, so that would be the contract he's currently on, it would be that or 50% of the first salary of the new contract. So if Julius is making $40 million for the sake of the math on his next
whichever
deal,
is higher, right?
It would be whichever's higher. So it would be $20 million versus the 28.9. Oh, but there's more. What more is there? The $28.9 million may not be $28.9 million because Julius has an unlikely bonus. The unlikely bonus is a really easy one. It just didn't convey last year, which is that Julius has to play 65 games and the Knicks have to make the playoffs. So if Julius can just do better than missing 17 games, his cap hit goes up, which also benefits the Knicks. So the Knicks could be saying, we value Julius. We also know he's probably not going to accept the offer we want. But if we wanted to take his salary for matching purposes and aggregate it, which then hard caps you at the second apron, with any salary to help you get a player you really want, like you go off of the 30 point whatever million dollars. I think it's 30.1 or 2. So in that context, right, you're comfortable not paying Julius because you feel like financially you can get away with doing whatever you have to do. And that is sort of where it comes to, where it's how interested are the Knicks in truly locking down Julius? Do they view this as something that they can just kick to the next season? They very easily could. It could even benefit them financially to not sign him now. It's just playing into that game of making math work. Because if I'm Julius Randle and I was named to these all NBA teams and I'm an all-star and I want to get paid and all this stuff, I could get paid. You're basically saying to him, you're telling me that I could get paid more than the max the Knicks could offer. And if it were somewhere else, then the cap hit benefits me to go to that place and it doesn't hurt the Knicks. It's kind of a win-win depending on how it shakes out. It's just if Julius stays and the Knicks pay him, then the Knicks probably have to, or they might have to pay him more. And I've been going on for a while. I'm getting very much into the weeds because the Knicks have to. And the real last thing. Let's say the Knicks don't pay Julius and they don't trade him. And then they're committed to not extending him next year. But they want to find avenues to get some other guy using Julius. But hey, if they get some other player and that player comes in, if they're taking on more money, hard caps them at the first apron. That's a no-no. So if Julius is staying for this season, the whole season, and he's not getting extended, it will impact other players on the roster. Because if the Knicks want to make the math work, it basically means we have to find other salary and make it more fungible to then add to the Julius factor to get that guy. And I'm not saying that they're definitely going to do this, it's going to work and all that. I'm not. But the Knicks have always prided themselves on being as prepared for these situations as possible. So it's a choice. Julius doesn't get moved. It means that you have to look at other players down the pike or, further down the depth chart of importance and find ways to go there.
This conversation needs to happen in the weeds because it's not a misconception. That's the wrong word. The biggest error that people make, I think, when having the Julius conversation is to think it is about, this is about whether Julius, fits the Knicks or he doesn't, or whether the Knicks like Julius or they don't like Julius. No, that's part of it. Obviously, that's part of it. It goes without saying. But at the same time, we collectively, like Knicks fans, may spend a lot of time going back and forth about Julius Randle. I think the Knicks at this point have a pretty good idea of what Julius Randle is, what he's going to be moving forward, what their ceiling is with him and what it's not. And the risks that would come, they know all this shit already. This is about logistics. And I think it is very interesting that Fred Katz in his recent piece on Julius Randle mentioned an option that I had not seen anybody else bring up. And so I want to give Fred a shout out, which is Julius opts in to his player option for the 25-26 season and then extends off of that number, which would allow the Knicks to skirt the second apron for one. We know they're going to be under the second apron next season. This would allow the Knicks to skirt the second apron for an additional season, which we're not going to get into all the cap stuff right now. But if you can kick that can down the road for one season, you do it. And it's probably going to wind up meaning a lot. It's probably going to extend your runway that much more. So I wonder, I guess maybe my biggest question right now, if I was to be able to ask Leon Rose something, I'm assuming that's the biggest thing for them right now is how do we avoid the second apron for 2 more years? And if they sign Randle starting at his max number that they could give him right now, which would be $40.5 million in 25-26, in this scenario, he would be opting out of that player option. It would be not impossible for them to stay under the second apron in that season, but would you agree with me that it would be difficult?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
I think it would be difficult.
The reason why is it depends on it basically ignores other potential moves being done. That's why I hesitated and said no. It's ultimately, I think they get there. It's just if we're talking about nothing else changes except for that, you're 1,000% correct.
Yes.
I don't expect that. I expect them to make other moves that would then, especially because if more money has to go out this season anyway, it's going to lower that threshold for the following year.
You're proving my point in a different way. It would necessitate them doing other things, jumping through other hoops that they may not want to jump through, because now it's not only we're considering our team, with Julius for someone else, it's we're considering our team with Julius, but without X, Y, or Z that we would need to do to duck the second apron because they don't want to be over the second apron in that year. Is that the thing that's most important, which I'm assuming? Or are they worried about, Julius he's going to be 30 years old in, what's his birthday, in November or December or something. He's going to be 30 years old pretty soon. He's had some injuries recently. You could say that they've been freak injuries. This is also a guy who plays with more physicality than anybody in the league. I mean, he throws his body is his biggest weapon. That's what makes him stand out from other guys. His position, power forward, with an emphasis on the power, doesn't really exist anymore in the NBA. It went away, with the dinosaur. He still has it, and there is a possibility that, these are not the last injuries that we see from him as he gets up in years. And so are they worried about, well, if things go a little sideways, not with the team or not even necessarily with like Julius, like getting some kind of catastrophic injury, but just like, dare I even say this? Not comparing these two players. But Zach LaVine might be the most untradeable contractor in the NBA right now. If he's not the most, he's up there. It was a year ago, Jeremy, where we sat here and had a conversation about Zach LaVine like being a potential target for the Knicks, and you made that presentation, and you were not crazy to do it at all, because this is a guy who had a couple of little dings and dents and things, but like immensely talented player. He's a lot younger than Julius. When you get players at this level who are not like in the top 10 or top 15, but they're more in that like 20, 25, 30, whatever range of the league, and something slips, something goes awry, all of a sudden that big number out there at the 4 years from now on their contract becomes mighty untenable. I wonder if it's more that part of it that they're worried about, because that's, or maybe they're just worried about both things, which it would make sense. But that's kind of what I'm curious about at this point.
Could be. And Fred's article, I appreciated the thoughts that he had there, because if Julius did opt in and extend, like kind of opt in and then extend and trade sort of thing, the way the math actually probably would benefit the Knicks if they were to move him that way, because I gather, it would have to be, yes, that his player option would be more than the previous season's cap hit. It just would have to be based on the name. So it actually might help the Knicks bridge the gap between, moving Julius' salary and not. And this is conversation for a much later date. I don't want to zoom too far ahead, because I have ideas of what they can do, but I'm going to keep some of them myself because we've got other content to produce.
We have a podcast, but Jeremy.
Yeah, we can slow walk this. There's plenty of time. But
we got time.
One of the thoughts also is, in the heat of the moment when the Precious news came out, I was having a work emergency, but I also wanted to put some thoughts out, and I wrote that it made a Julius extension more likely. And I was wrong on that, primarily because I wanted the Julius extension, because it's just a lot easier to move that contract. And if you are the type of person who doesn't want Julius on this team any longer, like let's move him, but also don't move him for a terrible deal, it doesn't really make sense to me why you wouldn't want him extended, because it's easier to move him. Because you don't have to worry about will he opt in? Where does he want to go if he doesn't opt in? Because it's a sign and trade. There's more in your control. But it's almost like help me help you sort of thing. But it's not viewed that way. And the Knicks are not going to be the type to downgrade. They have never done that. It's not going to be moving Julius to downgrade. And again, the only upgrade in this general context right this moment was the Cat discourse, which I don't even really want Cat. Like the craziest thing that I saw from Twitter with the reactions, because it's like, we don't want Cat. And like, you don't like, or Jeremy, like, why do you want Cat? It's like, I'm not even saying that. I just don't, they're not going to move Hart or DiVincenzo. It's not happening this summer. Or another one, which was, they could easily do it this winter. It's like, I didn't say this winter. I said this summer because of Precious's contract. Like, there's a reason there. There was another person who was like, you don't understand how this team works. I'm like, yeah, man, you're right. I don't follow this team. I have no clue.
Jeremy,
whatever.
Truth hurts.
It does. It really, and it hit me to my core. But that's the thing. I was wrong to use my own wants to get the Knicks, like to pass it off as an expectation. And it just wasn't the case. And of course, Ian talked about it like 20 minutes later of like, this doesn't make an extension likely. And I was like, well, that's a mistake that I made, which is fine. But it's like, there are ways for them to go. It's just the easiest thing possible is to say, should the Knicks re-sign Julius or not? And the real like nuts and bolts of this is, okay, so what happens in the scenario that they don't? And I don't think people are quite ready for what could transpire if Julius isn't signed because of the second apron, because of the direction they'd want to go. Because if it's not Julius, they'd want a better player. And it's figuring out who that better player is and how the math works for that and setting yourself up financially so you enter next summer prepared to potentially get that player. There's so much to unpack, and we're just kind of surface level on this. And that's all we need to be right now. I'm just warning people. It's going to be way more complex than should the Knicks bring back Julius or not.
And a part of that, and this we could end it here, is Julius has been an interesting guy over the time that he's been here. He seems to he seems to fluctuate in terms of his feelings at any given time, his personality. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that. The what does Julius want and what is Julius prepared to do to get what he wants, which are two separate questions, factors in here massively, because the odds that there is a situation that Julius would be able to walk into a team's cap space next summer and that team would be a contending team or even a semi-contending team that would welcome him in, I'm not sure that team is there. Things could change. I mentioned the Houston Rockets before. The Houston Rockets have a lot of cap space. How does Julius fit with them? That's a different conversation. I mean, if you think maybe the Spurs are going to take a big leap, maybe the Spurs could have cap space. Julius is from Texas. Both of those teams play in Texas. So, but how much does this next payday matter to him? And obviously money should matter to him. Money matters to us. Money matters to everybody. You need money to live. And I'm not going to begrudge anyone for getting every last time that they can. OG Anunoby didn't literally get every last time that he could, but he got a lot of dimes in the contract that he just signed. Julius sees that. He sees what OG is making. He knows what he provides to the team versus what OG provides to the team, at least in the scoring column. I wonder how he feels about that. I wonder how he feels about Jalen Brunson just taking what Jalen Brunson took. These are all factors. And again, I don't know how much the Knicks are worried about any of what I just talked about in terms of again, what Julius wants and what he's prepared to do to get it. But this situation is the thing that hit me the hardest was I started a thread yesterday on Substack chat, and someone was just the conversation turned to Julius, and someone was just can we just sit back and enjoy our contending team? We haven't had a fucking contending team in 3 decades. Can we just enjoy this? And I felt my heart went out to that person who made that comment. And at the same time, if you want to know the reality of what the new CBA is doing, that's the reality. Nobody gets to sit back and just enjoy it. You have to be thinking about this stuff every year, pretty much. That. That's just where we're at. It is where we are.
And in some ways, it makes it more fun. But
for us, it does.
I think for a lot of people, it makes it a lot more frustrating. I've done my diatribe of how it has ruined basketball discourse and the challenges there. But yeah, it's I can look at a list of numbers based on how the CBA is structured and be well, that player doesn't make sense because they're not signed next year and the chaos. That player doesn't make sense. It's easier for us, which hopefully helps us give a more narrow, targeted list, especially as trade season eventually comes upon us, which let's play the first basketball game, or let's even see who fills the 15th spot. But
yes,
but that's the chaos that it brings. And yes, to us, it's more fun. To the average basketball consumer, it's probably a pretty unfortunate experience.
All that being said, I, for one, Jeremy, am pretty ready, willing, and able to go into war, go into battle with this group. I'm excited about this team. I know you're excited about this team too. We are going to talk about the current Knicks more as the summer goes on. We will also have some more evergreen content, perhaps, because there's just nothing going on right now. So we'll have some of the same fun pods that we have had in past off seasons coming up for your listening pleasure over the next couple of months. I don't have anything else for you, Jeremy?
I'm just glad that we got through an hour of content. Considering,
and it was like real,
right,
like meaty stuff. It was good. This was good.
Yeah. I don't know if McCullough is going to sign that 2-way contract, but we'll figure it out. It's all right.
And they still have Jacob Toppin's, but they made Jacob Toppin the 2-way qualifying offer, right? I think they did. So that's just sitting out there. Yeah, I don't know. Stuff will happen. If you're just an NBA fan, tomorrow, as you're listening to this, Tuesday, August 6th is a big day because that's Lauri Markkanen Day. So we'll find out, does Lauri Markkanen extend on August 6th, which means he could be traded this season. So that's something to watch. And then the quarterfinals start on Tuesday as well for the Olympic men's basketball, which I'm looking forward to. So that'll be fun too. This was good. Happy to get back on with you.
Likewise.
Thank you. I feel like there's something else I should be saying, but no, I think we're good. Andrew didn't want to get back on here. And Andrew has too many things that he's responsible for, so he can't stay with us for an entire pod. But thank you, Andrew, for producing this podcast, and thank you everybody out there for listening to another episode of Knicks Film School. Thank our new sponsor here, BetUS, and we will be back, of course, with more fun and games before you know it. Peace out.
This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.